She leaves the bar without her shoes. She leaves behind her phone. She staggers through downtown Bloomington with a bruise under her eye, her purse and keys falling behind her in the dark. She is seen on cameras. She is seen by friends. She is seen by men who later say they try to help her. And then, just before dawn, Lauren Spierer walks out of an apartment and disappears forever. No confirmed sighting after that. No body. No arrest. No answer. Just a college town, one missing student, and a night so full of witnesses that someone should know exactly what happened. Before we continue, thousands of people watch these documentaries without subscribing. If you don't subscribe right now, YouTube's algorithm will never show you our content again. You won't see updates on Lauren Spierer or tomorrow's investigation. We release cases daily at 7:30 p.m., but we can only reach you if you're subscribed. Please hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and comment your location below. It takes 1 second. Lauren Spierer deserves her story told. Please help us. Lauren Elizabeth Spierer is 20 years old. Blonde. Petite. Social. Bright. The kind of young woman whose presence is instantly noticed in a room, not because she demands attention, but because she seems fully alive inside it. She is from Scarsdale, New York, an affluent community where expectations are high and futures are planned early. Her parents, Charlene and Robert Spierer, raise her in a stable home, the kind built on structure, support, and the quiet belief that hard work leads somewhere good. Her father is an accountant. Her family is close. Her life has direction. Lauren graduates from Edgemont High School and heads to Indiana University in Bloomington. She studies textiles merchandising. She builds a circle of friends. She stays active in the Jewish community on campus. She is not wandering through college without purpose. She is participating in it, living it, shaping it into something meaningful. She has history with the people around her, too. Some of the friends who later become central to this case are not random college acquaintances. They are people she has known from summer camp years earlier. People her parents know. People woven into the social fabric of her life. That matters, because when Lauren disappears, suspicion does not begin with strangers in dark alleys. It begins inside a familiar circle. And that is what makes this case so haunting. Lauren does not vanish on an empty highway. She does not disappear alone in some isolated place. She disappears in a crowded college town after a night spent moving from friend to friend, building to building, camera to camera. There are witnesses. There is a timeline. There are names. And still, there are no answers. The night begins like many college nights do. Late, loose, social. A Friday that has technically already become Saturday. Bars are still open. Apartments are still full. The campus is alive in that restless, half-drunken way college towns often are after midnight, when nobody wants the night to end and nobody is thinking clearly about how it might. Lauren's boyfriend, Jesse Wolfe, is not out with her that night. He texts with her before going to sleep. That detail later becomes important, because it leaves Lauren moving through Bloomington without the one person people might naturally expect to be protecting her. Instead, she is with already. You can feel the danger in that structure. Not dramatic danger, not obvious danger, but the kind of danger that grows from diffusion of responsibility. Everyone sees her condition. Everyone notices she is intoxicated. Everyone assumes someone else will make sure she gets home safely. At 1:46 in the morning, surveillance footage captures Lauren entering Kilroy's sports bar. It is one of the last clean points in the timeline, one of the last moments where events are recorded instead of remembered. Because after this, the story becomes a mix of cameras, fragments, witness accounts, and blurry human judgment. Inside Kilroy's, Lauren drinks heavily. Later reports suggest she was not just drunk, but extremely intoxicated. So intoxicated that the word staggering begins to follow her through every retelling of that night. There are also later claims of cocaine use, Klonopin, and the risk created by her rare heart condition, long QT syndrome. Those details will eventually fuel some of the darkest theories in the case. But in the moment, inside a college bar, they are just part of the blur. At 2:27 in the morning, Lauren is seen leaving Kilroy's with Corey Rossman. She leaves behind her shoes and her cell phone at the bar. That detail is so strange and so specific that it almost feels symbolic. A young woman walking barefoot into the night, disconnected from the very device that might have saved her. No shoes, no phone, no margin for safety. Rossman walks with Lauren back toward Smallwood Plaza, the apartment complex where she lives. At 2:30, she is seen entering the building area. A passerby named Zach Oakes notices how intoxicated she is and asks if she is okay. Even strangers can see it. That detail matters, because it confirms what everyone later says. Lauren is not mildly impaired. She is visibly vulnerable. And yet the night keeps moving. At 2:48, after leaving the apartments again, Lauren enters an alley running between College Avenue and Morton Street. Security cameras show her exiting the alley at 2:51 and heading toward an empty lot. Along that route, her purse and keys are later found. That is one of the most unsettling details in the whole case. Not because it proves what happened, but because it suggests disintegration. Her belongings are literally falling away from her as she moves through the dark. She and Rossman arrive at Rossman's apartment shortly afterward. Michael Beth, Rossman's roommate, is there. Rossman himself is reportedly so intoxicated that he is stumbling and vomiting. Beth later says he helps Rossman get to bed and then tries to persuade Lauren to stay over for her own safety. According to him, Lauren refuses. She wants to go back to her own apartment. That moment becomes critical, because from this point on, the case is no longer about where Lauren was. It is about who was responsible for her when everyone knew she should not have been alone. Beth says he calls his neighbor, Jay Rosenbaum, around 3:30 in the morning and asks him to help with Lauren. Beth later says Lauren had been trying to get him to drink with her at her apartment, but eventually she goes to Rosenbaum's place instead. By now, the entire night has become a pattern of movement between apartments controlled mostly by men who are all part of the same social orbit. When Rosenbaum sees her, he notices a bruise under her eye. She tells him she does not know how she got it. That single detail changes the tone of the story, because now Lauren is not just intoxicated. She is injured. Whether the bruise came from a fall, a collision, or something else, nobody can say for sure. But it places visible damage on her face before she vanishes. 2 calls are made from Rosenbaum's phone shortly before Lauren is said to leave. He says Lauren made them. One to David Rohn, one to another friend. Neither person answers. No messages are left. That means Lauren, in the final confirmed stretch of her life, is trying to reach someone. Maybe for a ride. Maybe for help. Maybe just because intoxicated people do unpredictable things in the middle of the night. But those calls add one more layer to the mystery. She is not simply drifting. She is still reaching outward. Then comes the last reported sighting. Around 4:30 in the morning, Jay Rosenbaum says Lauren leaves his apartment. He says he last sees her at the intersection of 11th Street and College Avenue, heading south on College. Barefoot, wearing black leggings and a white shirt. A tiny figure moving into the fading dark just before dawn. And that is it. No confirmed surveillance after that. No witness anyone can rely on beyond that. No final camera frame. No final phone ping. Just a statement from the last person known to have seen her alive. By daylight, the normal world begins to notice something is wrong. Jesse Wolf texts her. Instead of a reply from Lauren, he receives a response from an employee at Kilroy's. Her phone has been left behind at the bar. Suddenly, what looked like a drunken night starts to feel like something else entirely. A woman who leaves her shoes and phone behind, loses her purse and keys along an alley, appears badly intoxicated, and is last seen barefoot near dawn does not simply evaporate. Something happened between that last sighting and morning. The search begins fast, but not fast enough to erase the uncertainty already baked into the night. Bloomington police piece together the timeline using cameras and witness statements. Posters go up. News starts spreading. The campus tightens. Fear moves through Indiana University because Lauren is not some distant stranger. She is the kind of student every other student can imagine being. Out with friends. Bar to apartment. Apartment to street. A normal college night collapsing into a permanent mystery. And then comes the first shocking truth of the case. This was not a disappearance with no witnesses. This was a disappearance with too many. Too many people saw Lauren impaired. Too many people handled part of the night. Too many people were close to the final hours. And yet every handoff only seems to make her more unreachable. She keeps being seen, but never truly secured. She keeps being helped, but never actually protected. That is the twist that makes this story so infuriating. In most disappearances, investigators beg for a timeline. Here, they have one. In most disappearances, families beg for witnesses. Here, there are several. In most disappearances, the final hours are a blank. Here, They are crowded with names, places, and movement. And still, when dawn comes, Lauren Spierer is gone. No confirmed abduction. No discovered body. No arrest. No one charged. Just a college town full of fragments and a family left staring at the unbearable possibility that the truth has been sitting inside this timeline the entire time. So here's what I want to know from you. When a case has this many witnesses and this many handoffs, do you believe the truth is usually hidden by fear or by loyalty? Comment below. If you were Lauren's friend that night, at what point would you have called for help instead of assuming someone else had it handled? Once Lauren Spierer is officially missing, investigators move quickly to do what every disappearance case depends on in the beginning. They build the last known hours as precisely as possible, not because timelines solve cases by themselves, but because timelines expose pressure points. They reveal where choices were made, where stories overlap, and where the truth starts to bend. In Lauren's case, the timeline is not empty. That is what makes it so maddening. It is crowded. There are friends, cameras, passers-by, phone calls, apartments, bars, hallways, streets. A college town still awake deep into the morning. And yet somehow, even inside all of that visibility, she vanishes. Police start with the obvious. Who was with her? Who saw her? Who was responsible for her in those final hours? The names surface almost immediately. Corey Rossman, Michael Beth, Jay Rosenbaum, David Rohn, Jesse Wolfe. These are not anonymous strangers from a bar. These are people inside her circle, people connected to her life, people who later become central to both the investigation and the public suspicion surrounding the case. The first phase of the investigation focuses on reconstruction. Surveillance footage confirms Lauren entering Kilroy's. It confirms her leaving with Rossman. It confirms her movement around Smallwood Plaza and the alley. Police combine these camera images with witness statements to create a nearly minute-by-minute sequence. On paper, it should help. On paper, it should narrow things down. But in reality, it creates a different kind of problem. Because every piece of the timeline depends on one unstable factor. People who were drinking. People whose memories were formed in chaos. People who all had reasons to minimize what they saw or how impaired Lauren really was. That changes the quality of everything. A witness statement is not the same as a camera. And by the time investigators start pressing for answers, everyone involved has already had time to talk, think, panic, and lawyer up. That detail becomes huge. Because almost immediately, the men closest to Lauren that night are viewed differently by the public than by law enforcement. Police question them. The public fixates on them. The media practically freezes their names inside the case. From the outside, it looks obvious. Lauren was with these men. She was intoxicated. She disappeared after moving between their apartments. Therefore, one of them must know what happened. But police cannot work on feeling. They need proof. And that is where this case begins to harden into frustration. Rossman had been with Lauren when she left Kilroy's. He walked her back toward her apartment complex. He was also reportedly intoxicated himself to the point of stumbling and vomiting. That matters for two reasons. First, it makes him an unreliable caretaker. Second, it gives him a kind of shield. If he was that impaired, then maybe he truly does not know what happened after certain points. Or maybe impairment becomes the easiest excuse in the world. Michael Beth says he helped Rossman upstairs and tried to convince Lauren to stay over for her own safety. That statement is important because it establishes something central to the investigation. Everyone knew she was vulnerable. Everyone knew she was in bad shape. This is not a case where no one noticed anything unusual. It is the opposite. Her condition is obvious. A passerby noticed it. Friends noticed it. The men around her noticed it. And still, nobody put her safely behind a locked door and called it a night. Then there is Jay Rosenbaum. According to his account, Lauren eventually came to his apartment. He saw the bruise under her eye. He observed her condition. He says she made calls from his phone, then later left around 4:30 in the morning. He becomes the last reported person to see her alive. In almost any missing person case, that alone would make him one of the most scrutinized people in the investigation. Here, it makes him almost inseparable from the mystery. Because once the last person says, she left, the burden shifts. Investigators now have to prove whether she actually did. And that is much harder than it sounds. There is no surveillance showing Lauren after that point. No final image of her walking away barefoot into the dawn. No independent witness placing her blocks away. No camera following her further south on College. There is only Rosenbaum's statement. And in a case like this, one person's statement can hold up an entire investigation if there is nothing stronger to contradict it. Police dig deeper. They ask about intoxication. They ask about drug use. They ask about what was consumed, when, and with whom. This is where the case becomes even more complicated. Because Lauren's disappearance is not just wrapped in alcohol. It is tangled with reports of cocaine use and crushed Klonopin. Later, it also becomes public that Lauren had long QT syndrome, a heart condition that can increase the danger of drug use and stimulant stress. That detail opens a door investigators cannot ignore. What if Lauren did not leave that night alive at all? What if something medical happened? What if the reason nobody can explain the timeline is because the truth is not an abduction or stranger attack, but an overdose or cardiac event that led to panic? This theory becomes one of the most persistent and most controversial in the case. It has a brutal kind of logic. Lauren is heavily intoxicated. Drugs are reportedly involved. Her heart condition increases risk. She is passed from apartment to apartment among young men who are also drinking and possibly using drugs. If she collapsed, if she stopped breathing, if she died suddenly, the people around her might have panicked. They might have feared criminal charges. They might have made the worst decision possible. Hide what happened. Remove the body. Create confusion. Say she left. Police publicly address this possibility because they know the public is already talking about it. And the more they address it, the more it sticks. Not because it is proven, but because it explains something that the official timeline cannot. Why a woman could be seen by so many people and still never reach morning. But then the theory runs into resistance. A private investigator later points out something uncomfortable. On a college campus with widespread drug and alcohol use, would an overdose alone be enough motive for such an elaborate cover-up? Maybe. Maybe not. Panic does strange things. But covering up a death is not the same as dumping a person into absence forever. That requires more than fear. It requires decisions, coordination, silence, possibly multiple people maintaining the same lie for years. And that is where the theory starts to widen instead of narrow. Because if it was an accidental overdose, then who helped? If it was not, then why do the final witnesses all remain so central? If nothing criminal happened in those apartments, why does so much of the case feel trapped there? The investigation intensifies around the men. Lauren's parents make no secret of their suspicion. They do not always make direct accusations, but the distrust is there, and it is powerful. They believe people know more than they have said. They believe that somewhere inside those final hours, the truth is being withheld. The men respond by denying involvement and insisting they cooperated. Some take privately administered polygraphs. Lawyers become involved. And once lawyers enter a case like this, public suspicion tends to deepen instantly, whether fairly or not. This is where the case stops being just about a missing student and starts becoming a war over narrative. The men say they are being unfairly judged. Lauren's family says they have never gotten the full story. Police say they need evidence, not assumptions. The public watches all of it and starts forming camps. And once that happens, every detail gets interpreted through emotion. If someone lawyers up, it looks suspicious. If someone refuses a police polygraph but takes a private one, it looks evasive. If someone repeats the same statement too carefully, it sounds rehearsed. Every move becomes symbolic. But symbolism is not proof. And that gap between what feels true and what can be proved becomes one of the biggest obstacles in the case. Investigators keep pushing. They collect tips. A lot of them. Thousands over time. The case receives national attention. That kind of visibility is both useful and dangerous. Useful because more people hear Lauren's name and someone, somewhere, might know something. Dangerous because attention produces noise. False leads. Bad memories. Conspiracy. Misdirection. Then comes one of the most dramatic investigative moves in the entire case. A landfill search. Police spend days searching the Sycamore Ridge landfill, where Bloomington trash was transported after passing through a transfer station. That decision tells you a lot about where investigators' minds were going. You do not search a landfill in a missing person case unless you are considering the possibility that something terrible happened very early and the remains were disposed of quickly. It is a grim, labor-intensive, emotionally devastating move. A sign that investigators were willing to look at the darkest version of events. And yet, even that search ends the same way so many things in this case end. Nothing conclusive. No discovery. No breakthrough. No relief. Just another painful confirmation that investigators were thinking in serious directions and still coming up empty. Time passes, but the case keeps generating new branches. In 2015, investigators briefly explore a possible link between Lauren's disappearance and the murder of another Indiana University student, Hannah Wilson, who had also been at Kilroy's before vanishing. On the surface, the similarities feel chilling. Same bar, same college town, same female student, same late-night vulnerability. It is exactly the kind of parallel that captures public imagination immediately. But then that theory is rejected. By July of that year, authorities conclude the cases are unrelated. Similarities exist, but coincidence does not equal connection. That matters because it reminds everyone how dangerous pattern hunting can be. In unresolved cases, people want links. They want hidden predators and unified explanations. But sometimes two horrible cases happen in the same world without touching each other at all. Then another lead surfaces. A property in Martinsville. Cadaver dogs. A man with disturbing allegations tied to him. Investigators search the land, tow a truck, dig where the dogs react. For a moment, the case seems like it might finally crack open through physical evidence. But once again, nothing definitive is found. Another lead rises. Another lead dissolves. And by now, one truth is impossible to ignore. This investigation has no shortage of theories. What it lacks is resolution. Lauren may have been harmed by someone she knew. She may have overdosed and been concealed. She may have walked away and encountered a stranger. She may have been taken by someone completely outside the timeline. Each theory has pieces that fit and pieces that do not. And because none of them can be fully established, the case stays suspended in a state that is almost worse than silence. There is just enough evidence to accuse. Not enough to charge. Just enough suspicion to poison relationships. Not enough proof to end the argument. And that is exactly what makes Lauren Spierer's disappearance so addictive and so infuriating. The story does not go dark all at once. It dims in stages. First through the bar, then through the alley, then through the apartments, then through the final sighting. At every stage, someone seems to know a little, but no one seems to know enough. Or at least that is what they say. So here's what I want to know from you. When several people all saw the same vulnerable person in the same dangerous condition, do you think the truth is more likely hidden in one lie or spread across many half-truths? Comment below. If Lauren did not make it past those apartments safely, do you believe panic caused the silence or something much darker? Time does not slow down after Lauren Spierer disappears. It does something worse. It keeps moving forward while the answers stay frozen. Days turn into weeks. Weeks turn into months. And slowly, the urgency of the search begins to shift into something heavier. Something quieter. Something that feels less like a rescue and more like a long negotiation with uncertainty. Lauren's parents refused to let that happen quietly. From the beginning, Charlene and Robert Spierer refused to accept silence as an outcome. They do not treat this as a case that fades. They treat it as a fight that has to be kept alive every single day. They return to Bloomington. They speak to media. They walk the same streets Lauren walked. They hold on to the timeline, repeating it again and again, hoping that someone listening will finally notice the one detail everyone else missed. But the problem is not awareness. The problem is movement. Because even with thousands of tips coming in, the case does not progress in a straight line. It loops. It circles. It revisits the same questions with slightly different angles. Investigators follow leads, eliminate suspects, revisit statements, and test theories. But none of it produces the one thing the case desperately needs. A break that changes everything. Instead, the case becomes something else. A constant presence. Lauren's name does not disappear from headlines. It becomes part of a larger conversation about missing persons, media attention, and the way certain cases capture national focus while others fade into the background. Her case is discussed in classrooms, online forums, podcasts, documentaries. It becomes one of those stories people return to late at night, convinced that if they just think about it long enough, they can solve it. But thinking does not equal evidence. And that gap continues to grow. As the years pass, the investigation adapts. Cold cases are not abandoned cases. They evolve. Evidence is revisited. Files are re-examined. Interviews are reconsidered. What once seemed insignificant can become central. What once seemed suspicious can be dismissed. And what once felt impossible can suddenly become realistic with new techniques. But for Lauren's case, the core problem remains the same. There is no body. There is no confirmed crime scene. There is no definitive moment where everything clearly went wrong. And without those anchors, every theory has room to exist. Lauren's parents become more vocal over time about what they believe. They do not hide from the possibility that their daughter is dead. In fact, they say it openly. They believe someone knows what happened. They believe the truth is not out in the wilderness or hidden in a random act. They believe it is closer, personal, contained within the people who were with her that night. That belief shapes everything they do. It shapes the interviews. It shapes the media appearances. And eventually, it shapes a decision that takes the case into a completely different arena. Civil court. Lauren's parents file lawsuits against the men who were with her that night. Not criminal charges, but civil claims. Negligence. Responsibility. The argument is not that these men directly killed Lauren, but that their actions, their choices, and their failure to protect her contributed to what happened next. That they allowed a visibly intoxicated young woman to leave alone into the early morning, knowing she was vulnerable. This is a strategic move, because in a criminal case, prosecutors need proof beyond a reasonable doubt. In a civil case, the burden is lower. The goal is different. It is not just about punishment. It is about answers, discovery, access to records, forcing information into the open that might not surface otherwise. But even here, the case resists resolution. The lawsuits face resistance. Arguments are made that there is no direct evidence linking the defendants to Lauren's disappearance. That without knowing what actually happened to her, it is impossible to prove that their actions caused her death or injury. And eventually, the courts agree. The suits are dismissed. Appeals are filed. The dismissals are upheld. And once again, the case returns to the same place it has always been, unresolved. But something important happens during this period. The legal process exposes how fragile the entire case really is. Because when everything is laid out formally, under scrutiny, with legal standards applied, it becomes clear that the case is built on strong suspicion but weak proof. There are many things that feel wrong, many things that do not add up, many moments that raise questions. But there is no direct line from those moments to a confirmed outcome. And that is what keeps the case open while also keeping it stuck. At the same time, new investigative efforts continue. Properties are searched. Cadaver dogs are brought in. Tips lead authorities to locations outside Bloomington. Each search carries a kind of emotional weight. Because every time investigators dig, every time dogs react, every time something feels promising, there is hope that this will finally be the moment. And each time, that hope collapses again. Nothing conclusive, nothing definitive, nothing that can close the case. But then something else begins to change. Technology. As years pass, investigative tools evolve. Data analysis improves. Surveillance interpretation becomes more advanced. Communication patterns can be reconstructed in ways that were not possible in 2011. And with each advancement, there is always the question, what if the answer has been here the whole time, just waiting for the right tool to reveal it? That idea keeps the case alive in a different way, not just through memory, but through possibility. And yet, even with better tools, the case does not suddenly unlock. Because technology can only work with what exists. And in Lauren's case, what exists is still incomplete. No confirmed final movement beyond that last reported sighting. No recovered phone. No confirmed digital trail after that morning. No physical evidence that ties a suspect to a definitive act. Which means the case continues to exist in a strange space between progress and stagnation. Active, but unresolved. Discussed, but unanswered. Known, but unsolved. And then there is the emotional reality. For Lauren's family, time does not heal anything. It complicates it. Each year adds distance from the last moment they heard her voice. Each birthday becomes a reminder of the life she should still be living. Each anniversary of her disappearance becomes a marker of how long they have been waiting without answers. They continue to speak. They continue to push. They continue to ask the same question in different ways. What happened to Lauren? And perhaps more importantly, who knows the answer? Because after all these years, the case has reached a point where randomness feels less convincing. The idea that a stranger simply appeared at exactly the right moment, in exactly the right place, without leaving any trace, becomes harder to accept for many people following the case. Instead, attention returns again and again to those final hours. To the bar, to the alley, to the apartments, to the people who were there. And the more time passes, the more those moments feel like the center of everything. But then something else happens. The case begins to split in public perception. Some people become convinced that the answer is simple and hidden, that someone in Lauren's circle knows exactly what happened and has chosen silence. Others begin to consider more complex possibilities, that multiple events happened in sequence, that Lauren left safely but encountered something unexpected afterward, that the timeline we trust may be incomplete or slightly wrong in ways that matter more than we realize. And that division keeps the case alive, because every theory challenges another. Every explanation creates new questions, and no single narrative becomes dominant enough to close the conversation. Instead, the case becomes a permanent mystery, not forgotten, but never finished. And as time stretches further, one uncomfortable question starts to grow louder. If the answer has not surfaced after all these years, is it because no one knows what happened, or because someone does and has never said a word? So here's what I want to know from you. When a case stays unsolved for this long despite national attention, do you think it means the truth is buried beyond reach or protected by silence? Comment below. After all these years, do you believe the answer is still out there waiting to be discovered, or has it been known from the very beginning by someone who chose not to speak? At some point in every unsolved case, investigators stop chasing one answer and start managing possibilities. Not because they have given up, but because the case itself refuses to settle into a single direction. Lauren Spierer's disappearance reaches that point years ago. What remains is not one clean narrative, but several competing truths, each with its own logic, each with its own gaps. And that is where the final phase of this case lives. Not in certainty, but in tension. The first possibility is the one that has followed the case from the beginning. Something happened inside those final hours with people she knew. Not necessarily planned, not necessarily intentional, but something that changed everything. The idea of an accidental overdose remains central to this theory. Lauren was heavily intoxicated. Reports suggest drug use. Her long QT syndrome increases the risk of a fatal cardiac event. If something like that happened inside one of those apartments, it would explain the absence of a final sighting. It would explain why there is no clear crime scene. It would explain why multiple people's accounts align just enough to form a story, but not enough to fully convince. But then comes the difficult part. If that is what happened, what came next? Because an accident alone does not erase a person. An accident requires a decision afterward, a choice to report it, or a choice to hide it. And that is where this theory becomes morally heavy. It asks whether a group of young people, faced with panic, fear, and possible legal consequences, could have made a decision that would define the rest of their lives. It is a theory that explains a lot, but it proves nothing. The second possibility shifts the focus outward. Lauren leaves the apartment. She walks alone, barefoot, in the early morning hours. She is vulnerable, disoriented, and possibly under the influence. In that condition, she becomes an easy target. A stranger sees her, follows her, approaches her, and within minutes, she is gone. This theory has its own logic. College towns are not immune to crime. Opportunistic predators exist. A person alone at that hour, in that condition, presents a risk. It explains why there is no direct connection between suspects and the disappearance. It explains why no one inside her circle has been charged. It explains the absence of a body if she was taken elsewhere. But it has its own weakness: timing. For this to happen, everything would have to align perfectly for the perpetrator. The right place, the right moment, the right level of vulnerability, and then complete silence afterward. No witnesses, no physical evidence, no confirmed sightings. A perfect disappearance from a very imperfect situation. Possible, but unsettlingly precise. Then there is a third theory that lives somewhere between the two. A chain of events. Lauren leaves the apartment. Something happens shortly after. Maybe she falls. Maybe she encounters someone she recognizes. Maybe she accepts help. Maybe that help turns into something else. Not a single moment of disappearance, but a sequence. Small decisions stacking on top of each other until suddenly, there is no way back. This theory exists because real life rarely follows clean lines. It allows for both familiarity and randomness. It allows for mistakes, misjudgments, and unexpected encounters. It reflects how quickly a situation can change when someone is already in a vulnerable state. But again, it leads to the same place. No proof, no confirmation, no closure. And so the investigation continues, not toward a single answer, but toward narrowing the possibilities. Each year, investigators revisit evidence. Each year, new technologies offer the hope of uncovering something that was missed. Digital forensics, improved analysis techniques, better reconstruction of timelines. Every advancement carries the same quiet promise. Maybe now, maybe this is the piece that connects everything. But the case remains open, active, unresolved. Lauren Spierer is still listed as missing and presumed dead. Her name still appears in databases. Her face still appears in age-progressed images. Her story still circulates in documentaries, podcasts, and articles. Not because it has been solved, but because it has not. Because it resists being forgotten. And then there is the impact, not just on her family, but on the system around her case. Lauren's disappearance becomes part of a larger conversation about accountability, about responsibility, about how vulnerable individuals are treated in social environments where everyone assumes someone else will take care of them. It raises questions about what duty people have to each other, especially when someone is clearly not in control of their own safety. It also exposes something uncomfortable about investigations. That even with witnesses, surveillance, and national attention, a person can still vanish without resolution. That not every case reaches a courtroom. That not every story ends with an arrest. And that reality is difficult to accept, because it means some cases do not end. They linger. They evolve. They stay open in a way that feels permanent. Now here is where the case turns back to you. Because after everything you have heard, after every theory, every timeline, every possibility, there are still no definitive answers. Only questions that have grown sharper over time. So here's what I want to know from you. 1. Do you believe what happened to Lauren Spierer was an accident that turned into a cover-up or a deliberate act from the beginning? 2. Should the people who were with her that night be held morally responsible, even if there is no legal proof? 3. Do you think the truth is more likely inside her circle or completely outside of it? For if new technology eventually identifies a clear answer, would it change how you view the people involved, or is your opinion already fixed? 5. What is worse in a case like this, never finding the person responsible, or never knowing what actually happened at all? Drop your answers in the comments. I am reading every single one, and I want to hear what you think, because this case does not give easy answers. And here is the part that stays with people long after the story ends. A young woman walked out into the night. She was seen. She was known. She was surrounded by people who recognized her condition. And still, she disappeared. Not in a remote forest, not in isolation, but in a place filled with witnesses, movement, and life. That is what makes this case so unsettling. Not just that she is gone, but how she disappeared in plain sight. For her family, the search has never truly ended. Not in the physical sense, but in the emotional one. Every year is another year without answers. Every day is another day of not knowing. And yet, they continue. Because stopping would mean accepting something they are not ready to accept. This case changed how people look at safety. It changed conversations around responsibility and awareness. It forced people to confront how quickly situations can spiral when no one steps in at the right moment. But it also left something unfinished. A space where answers should be. So if there is anything you take from this story, let it be this. Cases like this do not solve themselves. They depend on people, on memory, on someone choosing to speak when they have stayed silent. If you know something, even if it feels small, even if it feels insignificant, it matters. Because somewhere in this story, the truth exists. It always has. And until it is spoken, this case remains open. If you want more cases like this, cases that challenge what we think we understand about truth, justice, and human behavior, subscribe and turn on notifications. We release new investigations every day at 7:30 p.m., and you do not want to miss what comes next. Comment your location below, share your thoughts on the questions, and be part of the conversation. Because sometimes, the only way cases like this move forward is when people refuse to stop asking what really happened.